Most bike owners don't set out to be stupid. But when it comes to taking care of a motorcycle, there's a very thin line between being hands-on and being a complete moron. And here's the kicker. It's not always obvious. A lot of these mistakes look harmless at first. Some even seem smart if you don't know what you're doing. But sooner or later, they'll cost you in money, performance, or your own skin. So today, we're calling it out. Not the usual don't ride without gear nonsense. I'm talking about the real stupid stuff. The kind that quietly kills your bike from the inside or sets you up for disaster down the road. Let's kick it off with one of the dumbest habits that destroys engines faster than bad gas. Number 1. Use an RTV like it's mayonnaise. Some folks think gasket maker is magic in a tube. They smear it on like they're icing a cake, convinced that more is better. But here's the reality. Every extra glob of RTV that squeezes out on the inside of an engine is a ticking time bomb. When you overdo it with RTV, especially on oil pans, valve covers, or water pump housings, those bits of squish out can break off, float around, and end up clogging vital oil passages. I've seen engines die from oil starvation because someone thought the factory service manual was just a suggestion. Worse, some riders use it in places it doesn't even belong, like on gaskets that are already crush fit or around oil filters that don't need a damn thing. That's not sealing, that's sabotage. And here's a twist. The bike will run fine for a while. But inside, that silicone spaghetti is floating toward a main bearing like a torpedo. When it hits, say goodbye to your oil pressure and probably your engine. Smart riders know a razor blade, a torque wrench, and the right amount of sealant, read almost none, will take you further than a fistful of goo ever will. It's not about sealing, it's about precision. And if you don't get that, you don't belong anywhere near a tube of RTV. Number 2. Over-tightening axle bolts and calling it secure. There's a special kind of stupidity that comes from mistaking tight for safe. I've seen way too many riders yank down on axle bolts like they're trying to crush coal into diamonds. Because tight means it won't come loose, right? Wrong. That's how you strip threads, crush spacers, distort bearings, and turn your front end into a time bomb. Your axle isn't holding on for dear life. It's part of a precision system. Over-tighten the pinch bolts or the axle nut, and you can actually compress the fork legs inward, messing up alignment and making your bike track like a drunk shopping cart. Or worse, you preload the bearings and heat them up until they grenade at 70 miles an hour. The torque spec exists for a reason, and no, pretty tight isn't a unit of measurement. You might think you're being thorough. All you're really doing is slowly wrecking the most critical part of your chassis. It even gets dumber when someone decides to use an impact wrench. Nothing says, I have no idea what I'm doing, like blasting down a steel axle nut with 120 foot-pounds of mystery torque. Then, wondering why your rear wheel suddenly feels weird. The truth is, torque wrenches aren't just for pros. They're for anyone who doesn't want to die because their wheel walked out mid-corner. You don't need brute force. You need the ability to read a number and stop when it clicks. If that sounds hard, maybe stick to bicycles. Number 3. Custom exhaust, no retune, because it sounds better. There's a breed of rider who believes that if it sounds faster, it must be faster. So they rip off the stock exhaust, slap on the cheapest straight pipe they can find, and proudly declare victory over back pressure and common sense. The result? A bike that screams like a banshee and runs like garbage. Here's the truth. Modern fuel-injected bikes are tuned precisely for their stock exhaust. Yank that out, and suddenly you're running lean, frying valves, and torching your mid-range power. But hey, at least you're louder now, because nothing says performance like a bike that surges, stalls, and smells like molten plastic at stoplights. And no, your "but it ran fine for the first week" excuse doesn't hold up, That's like saying you're healthy because your junk food hasn't killed you. Yet. The damage doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in. Burnt valves, warped headers, bad fuel trims, until one day, the bike just doesn't start. Or worse, it backfires hard enough to melt your intake boots. And don't even start with, the ECU will adjust. Sure, a few bikes have self-learning systems, but most need a proper remap or a piggyback tuner to keep the air-fuel ratio in check. Otherwise, you're just running lean and loud, a recipe for disaster. Look, we get it. You want sound. You want attention. But if you're gonna mess with the lungs of your bike, do the damn homework. Otherwise, all you've got is a rolling grenade with Bluetooth flames. Number 4. Skip in chain slack checks until it eats your sprocket. Chain maintenance isn't rocket science, but some riders treat it like it's optional. I've seen chains so tight they sounded like guitar strings, and others so loose they were slapping the swing arm like a drunk eel. Both are a disaster waiting to happen, but the real stupidity, thinking it doesn't matter as long as the bike still moves. A chain that's too tight puts constant stress on your output shaft bearings. That's not just bad, it's catastrophic. You're literally pulling your engine apart every time the suspension compresses. On the flip side, a loose chain doesn't just slap around. It skips teeth, tears up sprockets, and eventually derails altogether. Best case, you coast to a stop. Worst case, it locks the rear wheel mid-turn and turns your ride into a YouTube crash compilation. What makes this extra dumb is how easy it is to check. 1 minute, a few fingers, a ruler if you're fancy. Most swing arms even have little guides built in. But no, some riders would rather gamble with a multi-$1,000 repair than get their hands a little dirty. And don't even get me started on alignment. If your rear wheel isn't straight, your chain wears out faster, your sprockets get chewed up, and your bike handles like it's drunk. But sure, go ahead and eyeball it, champ. Your chain is a critical link, literally, between your throttle and traction. Ignore it, and it'll remind you the hard way. Loudly, expensively, and maybe painfully. Number 5. Using cheap eBay levers because they look cool. Levers are one of the first things new riders swap out. It makes sense. You touch them constantly, and adjustable ones feel great. The second you start browsing eBay and ordering the $18 folding telescoping rainbow fade specials with names like Fonger or Broke Racing, already made a mistake. Here's the thing. Levers aren't just cosmetic. They're part of your control system. And when you bolt on some pot metal trash that was machined with tolerances made for garden tools, you're rolling the dice every time you squeeze the brake. I've seen these things seize, bend, snap, or worse, fail to return fully, keeping the brake slightly engaged until the calipers boil over and you got no stopping power left at all. And if you've never felt what that's like going downhill at 60 miles an hour, you don't wanna. There's also the fitment issue. Some of these knockoffs don't line up with your master cylinder plunger or clutch switch. So you're riding around thinking everything's fine until the clutch won't disengage properly, or your starter interlock randomly cuts out at a light. But hey, they look cool, right? Here's the brutal truth. If you're not willing to spend $60 to $100 for proper levers from a trusted brand, you got no business swapping them at all. The stock ones might be boring, but at least they won't snap off the first time you drop the bike in a parking lot. And if you think nobody died because of a bad brake lever, dead wrong. Number 6. Bringing WD-40 on your chain like it's chain lube. Let's clear this up once and for all. WD-40 is not chain lube. It's not even close. It's a water-displacing solvent designed to clean, not lubricate. But you'd be shocked how many riders grab that blue and yellow can, soak their chain like they're seasoning a steak, and call it a day. Sure, it smells nice and makes the chain look shiny for about 5 minutes. Then it evaporates, takes any residual grease with it, and leaves your O-rings dry, your rollers exposed, and your chain squeaking like a haunted tricycle. Even worse, if you ride a modern sealed chain, O-ring, X-ring, Z-ring, whatever, WD-40 can actually degrade those rubber seals over time. And once those seals are compromised, the factory-applied grease inside the links starts leaking out. That's when wear goes exponential and your chain turns into a rusty noisemaker on wheels. And let's not forget the overspray. You hit that rear tire just once with a good mist and a slippery solvent, and congratulations. You've just lubed your contact patch. Hope you like surprise power slides. Look, cleaning your chain is good, but clean it right. With a proper degreaser, a brush, and then re-lube it with something made for chains. Real chain lube sticks, penetrates, and protects. WD-40 does none of that. So unless your goal is to destroy a $200 chain and 2 sprockets in under a season, leave the WD-40 for the garage door hinges. Number 7. Mix in brake fluids like you're stirring a cocktail. Brake fluid is one of those things people pretend to understand, until they top off their reservoir with the wrong stuff and wonder why their brakes feel like a sponge dipped in soup. DOT3, DOT4, DOT5, DOT 5.1. It's not alphabet soup, it's chemistry. And mixing them up isn't just dumb, it's dangerous. Here's the rule. DOT3, 4, and 5.1 are glycol-based and can mix in an emergency. DOT5 is silicone-based and absolutely can't. But do most riders know what's in their system? Nope. They just grab whatever's on the shelf and pour it in like it's windshield washer fluid. And the consequences? Massive. The fluid can foam, the seals can swell or fail, your braking performance drops to nothing, and you won't notice until you're panic braking downhill and squeezing the lever like a stress ball while your bike keeps rolling. It's even worse when people decide to upgrade their fluid without flushing the system. You think you're getting higher boiling points, but what you've actually created is a chemical cocktail that degrades faster, absorbs moisture, and ruins every rubber component it touches. Brake systems are precision hydraulic circuits. You can't just throw in whatever's laying around. If your cap says DOT4, you give it DOT4. End of story. And if you don't remember the last time you flushed it, it's already overdue. Smart riders treat brake fluid like blood, vital, volatile, and not something you play with unless you know exactly what you're doing. Everyone else, they're just one bad bleed away from meeting the pavement. Number 8. Ignoring valve adjustments because it still starts. Ask most riders when they last adjusted their valves and you'll get one of 2 answers, a nervous laugh or a blank stare. Because if the bike isn't making weird noises, running rough, or refusing to start, it must be fine, right? Wrong. Valve clearance isn't just some optional maintenance item. It's one of the most critical and most neglected things on your bike. And the scary part, when things go wrong, they usually do it quietly. On most modern engines, valves tighten over time as the seats wear. That means less clearance, less time for the valve to cool off between cycles, and eventually, a valve that doesn't fully close. That's when you start losing compression, frying your seats, and heading for a rebuild you could have avoided with a couple of feeler gauges and an afternoon of patience. And the worst offenders? Bikes with shim under bucket designs, especially sport bikes. Because it's a pain to get to turns into 5 years of ignoring spec sheets until the bike starts misfiring at idle and nobody knows why. Letting your valves go too tight is like riding around with a slow oil leak you never check. Everything might seem fine until the performance drops off a cliff or the bike refuses to start hot. Then you're paying for machine work instead of just a shim kit and some time in the garage. Don't be the guy who waits until the engine sounds like a sewing machine in distress. If you care about performance, and you should, valve checks are non-negotiable. It's not sexy, but neither is a toasted cylinder head. Number 9. Using tap water in the cooling system. You'd think this one would be obvious, but apparently not. Some riders out there are still topping off their radiators with tap water like they're watering houseplants. It's just water, they say, like the engine doesn't care what kind. Spoiler alert, it cares a lot. Tap water is full of minerals, calcium, magnesium, and all kinds of lovely scale-forming junk that loves to cling to aluminum, clog radiators, and turn your cooling passages into a crusty disaster. It doesn't just reduce efficiency, it can lead to overheating, blown head gaskets, and a repair bill that starts with engine out. Even worse, when mixed with modern coolant, it can screw up the pH balance, degrade the corrosion inhibitors, and literally accelerate the process of electrolysis inside your engine. That means your coolant starts attacking your own metal parts. It's like pouring a little cancer into your radiator every time you top it off. And no, I've been doing it for years and it's fine. Doesn't mean it's smart. It just means your bike hasn't cried out loud enough yet. If you're in a pinch, use distilled water at the very least. Better yet, always mix coolant with deionized or pre-mixed 50-50 coolant right from the jug. It's cheap insurance for one of the most vital systems on the bike. Because if you think a gallon of proper coolant is expensive, wait until you're pricing out radiators, head work, or a warped cylinder block because your $2 hose water turned into a thermal time bomb. Number 10. Putting on bar end mirrors without Loctite, or a clue. Bar end mirrors can look slick, clean up the cockpit, and give you that cafe racer but make it modern vibe. But here's what stupid people forget. Those mirrors are only as good as the single bolt holding them on. And when you install them dry, loose, or worse, on bars that weren't even designed for them, guess what happens? They rattle, they spin, they fall off. Usually while you're riding, and always when there's traffic behind you. Even worse, some riders remove the factory bar end weights entirely just to make them fit, not realizing they've just compromised the entire handlebar balance. Now you've got more vibrations, numb fingers, and a mirror that flops around like a dead fish every time you hit a pothole. And let's not forget, most cheap bar end kits use soft metal and junk hardware. That screw, it'll strip the first time you torque it properly, if you bother to torque it at all. If you want to run bar ends, fine, but do it right. Use proper expanding adapters, torque the fasteners, and for the love of sanity, use thread locker. Blue, not red, unless you want to make removing them a full day affair. Because nothing says rookie like a bike with one mirror and a scratched gas tank from when the other one fell off at a red light. Number 11. Swapping clip-ons without checking fork adjustment. There's nothing wrong with upgrading your bars, unless you do it like an amateur. I've seen riders swap to clip-ons thinking it's just a bolt-on job, slap them on, eyeball the angle, and ride off into the sunset. But here's what they forget. Those bars clamp directly to your fork tubes, and if you misalign them, you just twisted your entire front end. Now your forks are binded, your steering feels off, and your suspension doesn't compress evenly. It might not even be obvious at first, but give it a few miles and your handling starts to feel weird. You'll convince yourself it's the tires or the road or maybe the weather. Nope, it's your own handiwork. Worse, some people crank the clip-on so tight they crush the fork tubes or leave bite marks in anodized metal. That's not secure. That's destructive. If you're gonna mess with cockpit geometry, at least use a flat surface. Check your fork height, align your front wheel properly, and torque everything to spec. Otherwise, congratulations. You've just turned your upgrade into a downgrade. Number 12. Leaving your kill switch on and wondering why the bike won't start. It happens once, maybe twice, to every rider. But if you're still doing it after a year of ownership, that's just dumb. You thumb the starter, nothing happens, and immediately assume your battery's dead, your starter's toast, or your ECU has given up on life. Meanwhile, that bright red kill switch is still flipped right where you left it. You'd be amazed how many people have pushed their bike home, torn it apart, or called a tow truck over this. One switch, 1 second, Total clown move. Double check it, always, before you start replacing things that weren't broken. Every rider starts somewhere, and usually it's with at least one dumb mistake under their belt. What matters is whether you keep doing it or smarten up. So tell me, what's the worst thing you've ever done to your own bike? Be honest. Drop it in the comments, and let's all learn from it or laugh at it. And if you like this one, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because there's a whole lot more dumbness out there, and we're not done calling it out.